That's because we should know better.
Well,
We should know better, but we don't.
The broadcast is live.
Hey.
Ooh. Is
All right,
it live? Where did you even see that?
It popped up on the screen.
Didn't. Oh, so it did. Cool. And Rob says we're live.
We're live.
Good.
Yeah.
Yay.
Hi, everyone.
Everybody. Cool. We are here at Gauntlet Con doing this fantastic panel, which is Podcasting 101. And clearly the first thing we should probably do is introduce some of the awesome people here. We are all representing Misdirected Mark Productions today and our various podcasts. So let me actually just the way that my screen is laid out, which I think is the same as everybody's because it's not Hangouts, so it doesn't rearrange. So I'm going to start at the left, which means Ray. You are first.
Hi, I'm Ray. My microphone's way down here.
Yeah.
I'm Ray.
Podcasters.
I'm an industry unprofessional, and I'm the co-host of Bonus Experience, which is a podcast that takes a deeper look at the play experience and the finer details of running and writing games. To my right is
Hi, I'm Monica, the other half of Bonus Experience, which Ray already described. I'm the industry professional, which she also is technically, but that's your tagline. I am a writer and developer for the Onyx Path Productions, and I got the wild hair up my ass that started BXP, so that makes me eminently qualified to talk about starting a podcast.
Sure. Yay. Hi.
Hi.
And I'm Senda. If you don't know me, I do two podcasts. I do She's a Super Geek, which is an actual play RPG podcast that highlights women as GMs. And I do Panda's Talking Games, which is a short form podcast in which we basically give out GMing advice and sometimes game design advice. I do game design. My first Kickstarter was January for a game called Turning Point, which you can get on. Other things I write for gnomes too. It's hard for me to compress sometimes that you guys did so much better with like a short form introduction.
You practiced it.
Well done.
It's just
every time I have to do
podcast
yeah. Every time I have to do everything, I'm like, oh no, that was a lot. I'm just gonna stop somewhere in here. Fantastic. So we have some things kind of that we thought we would just jump in and talk about because they are questions that I think we frequently get being podcasters, and they're the things. Otherwise, they're also things that I feel like people don't always think about when they're like, "I'm going to start a podcast." So we'll just jump in with those, but we will probably have some time to talk about whatever people want to talk about, depending on how nervous and how fast we talk through all of our points.
if we fidgeting on camera.
No.
Just so the whole audience knows, neither of us can sit still. So you're just gonna have to deal with a whole lot of fidgeting.
Well, podcasts are in audio form.
Yeah.
So the interesting part is always when you're like, now you can see the video, and it's like, well, you never expected what you got.
I've got a face for podcasting.
No, you don't. You're fucking adorable.
There you go. Can we cuss? Rob, can we cuss? You should tell us if we can cuss.
Can we cuss?
I didn't ask.
We always open our podcast with "Yes, we swear." Too bad. I'm mad about it.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Rob isn't answering. His silence is damning.
No, his silence means we should beg for forgiveness instead of ask permission. Yep. Good. So cool. So let's jump right in with just some of the stuff that is the basics that we have on our list here.
Podcasting 101.
Podcasting 101.5. Official opening on the street. Thank you. Got it.
Thank you.
Awesome. So,
fuck yeah.
Fuck yes. Good. So the thing that we will start with is let's talk about figuring out what your podcast will be about.
Yes. That's an important thing.
You have to have an about.
You have to have an about. So like Monica, tell me for like Bonus Experience, how did you figure out like what was the wild hair that was like, this needs to be a podcast?
This infamous story. Great.
Tell me the story.
A whole new venue for this story.
Right, a whole new public audience to tell the story to. I think I'll do it without naming names. In general, my husband was watching a very popular YouTuber who was giving out tabletop running advice, and the person is a fellow of the cishet white man persuasion, and the advice that they were giving was basically like, if you talk to your players, they'll do what you want them to. And I was like, only men think that's revolutionary. And I got so mad. I was like, listen, I give much better GM storytelling, whatever advice to people when they just ask me. I should be doing this for an audience. And I texted Ray in a fit of pique, and I was like, we're fucking doing a podcast. You want to do this with me?
Yeah. I love hearing the sound of my own voice. Let's do this.
So I decided after calming down that we would talk about
taking a little nippy nap.
Yeah. I took a little nippy nap.
I
had a snack. I had some tea, and I calmed down. I was no longer angry, and you could talk me. So I decided that we would definitely do a podcast that was about technical aspects of gaming, how to improve your skills. And I didn't really want to do basic stuff. That we did just do a 101 series, but that was a series that we did. It's not the gist of the whole show, because you can throw a rock and hit any podcast that gives you basic GM 101 advice, typically hosted by a person of the white man persuasion. And so I was like, we're two queer women. We're really smart. We have a lot of things good to say that aren't just did you know that you can talk to people? And so the thesis, what Ray said at the beginning of the podcast is the thesis statement for our show. And every episode begins with us telling you we're two queer women speaking with authority about games. It's a podcast about running, writing, and designing games. So that right there is the whole of BXP. And every topic we do relates to running, writing, or designing games in some aspect.
Right. So, so before I start throwing a bunch of things, actually, because I was about to tell my story, but
go tell your story.
No, Ray.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know. Thoughts, feelings.
Oh,
magic fairy dust.
I honestly, I got all about this idea because I really love to run and write games. I've always honestly been really into audio processing and audio production. My dad has been in radio since before I was born, honestly. So I would hang out at the radio station, play around with the editing equipment. So Monica brought up running a podcast. I was like, yes, I want to edit it. And also wow. I was intrigued at the idea of being given explicit space and permission to talk about this hobby with authority, because for the longest time I felt like I'm kind of an interloper. There's other people who are going to be talking over me. So this idea of, no, this is going to be our podcast and we're going to talk like we know what we're talking about, because we do. So Monica honestly came up with the vast majority of the concept and the pitch. And I was just there for snowballing bad name ideas and things like that.
And also for doing the editing, because everyone who does a podcast needs to find someone like Ray, because otherwise then you have to do the editing.
Yeah. Editing, yeah. I enjoy it. It just
that face
takes a while.
Yeah, when it comes to audio editing or any of that process, I don't know shit about fuck, so I'm just like, have at it. I'm glad that you want to, because I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's an interesting thing here, and I will tell a quick story about how my first podcast started, which was She's a Super Geek, and then I think we can fishtail into a moral about how you come up with a podcast and an elevator pitch for said podcast. So, She's a Super Geek exists because I was really annoyed that I was listening to. Whoa, where did everyone go?
I'm still here. I just
farewell.
Oh, okay, we're back.
That was strange. What happened?
You were telling your story, and the camera gave
the video changed.
It's gonna start zooming in. There's gonna be like a fuzzy.
There's gonna be music.
Focus.
Here, hang on. I got my harp over here. It'll be. I remember the day. Okay. Anyway, so She's a Super Geek started because I was falling in love with actual play podcasts all over the place, and they were only really representative of one specific kind of person mostly, and the ones that I was finding that had people on them who did not necessarily identify as cishet male were like cishet white male were not always comfortable for me listening to that person in that situation. And I didn't like it. And there was Star Wars Campaign, the wonderful podcast that I adore and will never finish listening to, because if I ever do, it will be over. And I can't. There was that, and then there was that Cat Cool was running, and there was Cthulhu and Friends, which Victoria was running. And that was like literally it. There was like no women running games visibly anywhere that I could find, which was obnoxious. And so I went to my friend Andy and I said, hey, we should make a podcast where like we expand on who basically is in this leadership role at the table. And like, I can't promise that I would always be able to find someone of, another identity to run a game, but you or I could always run a game. So we are an actual play podcast that highlights women as GMs. If you listen to my show, there is always a woman running the game. It is not always Andy or I, but it is always a woman running a game. Because there weren't any when we started it. There are many now, which is great. But it was like a hole in the podcasting world. And there's a secondary interesting thing there, which is that just in podcasting in general, the actual percentage of people doing podcasts are also skewed a little bit, just across the board. Anyway,
yeah.
That story aside, how can we synthesize our experiences? I mean, the interesting thing is we both got mad about things that didn't exist.
Yeah.
And so we made them. And I think that like what we can take away from that is that what you're looking for in your podcast is what's going to make your content unique, right? Like if you can't say in an elevator pitch what your podcast is about, it's going to be very hard to tell people what it's about. And when you have strong feelings about something, Rob's talking and I can't concentrate. If you have strong feelings about something that doesn't exist, that means that it should probably exist, because you're probably not the only person who wishes that it existed.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, you go.
Oh, I was just going to say, which doesn't mean that it has to be like a unique, totally new thing, because you're never going to come up with a topic that someone else hasn't already talked about. Like, Bonus Experience is not the only game design podcast.
No.
And
not even on our network.
Right. Not even right. We're like the fourth one on the network.
It is the only game design podcast run by me and Monica.
Yes.
True.
And it is specifically two queer women talking about games with authority. Fucking die mad about it, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
So it has a couple of things. That has like specific people and different coming from a different perspective than you might hear all the time. So that's key, right? You guys have a very specific brand sense of humor that will like.
That's a really charitable way to put it.
I enjoy it.
Wait, like, no, she's totally right. I was almost about to say, but you would be hard pressed to find a game design podcast that's funnier than ours.
I mean, I feel like I'll fight you on that one, because I feel like my outtakes are pretty damn good.
That's true.
Yeah.
But
you make people pay for those.
Not all of them. Some of them are just at the end of the show. You just gotta pay for the extra ones.
Okay.
There are just so many. I don't know what to do with the extra ones. So I was like, "Will you buy these from me? Take them.
Throw them away.
Otherwise, I'm just gonna put them on the floor and they're gonna lie there. It'll be sad. They're just the clippings, you know." Yes.
Right.
No, I don't make people pay for all
unique.
of them. Right. Anyway, yeah, unique.
Elevator pitch.
And there's I think there's one more thing, because there's an interesting thing. There's an interesting dichotomy for me with my two podcasts. I started She's a Super Geek, and I had a very firm point, because like you guys, I was angry about a thing. I was like,
Spite is a powerful motivator.
It truly is. It truly is. I was like, why aren't these here? And I was listening to podcasts people were recommending to me, and some of them are very big names. And there was like some really horrible rape jokes and a really uncomfortable sounding woman laughing. And I was like, I hear the discomfort in every noise you're making, and I hate this, right? Like, I don't want this. So there was that, which was the anger one. And then there was Panda's Talking Games was me and Phil, and he was like, this is really cool. You're really smart. We should do a podcast. And I was like, haha, sure. Yeah, whatever. What are we going to do a podcast about? And then we like spent 2 weeks trying to come up with an idea. Right. So, like, and he used to have more of a specific idea, but now we've been doing it for 3 years. So it's like, well, we ran out of that. So we're just going to talk about this now. And, that one is harder to promote, like straight up. But the purpose of that podcast is a little bit different to me because it's a podcast that I do with my best friend, and like we chill and just talk. And the people who listen to that podcast really, really like it. But it is a smaller audience, and I don't really care. Like, right? So it's one of those interesting things you also need to consider, like, what is your purpose here? If your purpose is to get a big audience and show people things or get your voice really out there and heard, you may approach this marketing differently than if you are like, I'm going to make a podcast because I'm really excited about this. And I think that people, you know, I want to record my game for posterity, and I don't really care if anybody listens to it or not, right? Like, I want people to listen to Panda's Talking Games. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to fix that. I think it's an amazing show. I think more people should listen to it. But like, there is a certain aspect of like how you approach this, like, what's your end goal, right? So it may not matter as much exactly how unique it is or exactly what your elevator pitch is. If your goal is more like, I'm going to chill and record with my friends, than it is like, I'm going to make a thing because this voice needs to be heard and we need to get it out there. And I want to, you know, potentially make money. That's the thing that happens to some people who make podcasts, sort of. No one's going to make big bucks in podcasting except for like James D'Amato, like, and
unless your last name is McElroy. It's just not going to happen.
Don't get into this to leave your day job.
Right.
Let's just put it that way. So
I guess we can.
Oh dear,
there's questions. Oh
yes, we have questions. We've been ignoring the questions because Rob's been talking to us.
Oh, okay.
Blaming this on Rob.
Yeah, geez.
My cat was ripping up the carpet.
We actually couldn't hear it, or at least I couldn't hear it.
I muted my mic locally so that you could not hear it or me yelling at her.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. She's been removed, but the heckler in the audience has been removed.
We've got this. Oh, I forgot my fizzy water.
I didn't bring fizzy water.
What am I going to do?
How could you do this to me?
I know. I have my grapefruit spindrift. It's in the kitchen right now. If we were not
answer those questions.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So let me ask you guys this: should we answer questions, or should we like skim through the rest of our stuff real quick and then jump into questions?
Why don't we get through our first topic, like with the talking, like about, like what is your podcast going to be about?
Okay.
And then we can answer the pertinent questions.
And then we'll jump over before we like make podcasts happen and stuff.
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Cool.
Get to the concept stage and then get to the production stage.
Yeah, because we can kind of have the split in half of like, here's the brain part, here's the action part.
Yeah. So
action
concept. As far as if you're looking for like coming up with your elevator pitch, this is more for the podcasts that are going to be about, you know, finding a space where people need to hear your voice and then screaming as loud as you can. The pitch, you want to make sure that this is something that you can it can't be too long and it can't be too short. If it takes too long to explain, you need to cut down your concept a bit. If it's only like 2 words, like we talk about games, you might need to pare that down a little bit. And the great thing about an elevator pitch is it can also work as your logline or your catchphrase. Like our elevator pitch, you know, podcast with a deeper look at the play experience and the finer details of running and writing games. That's our pitch. That's also what we say every episode. It's what's in all of our copy, you know. So it pulls, you know, double, triple duty there. So your elevator pitch is actually pretty important when you're coming up with this concept.
Agree.
Cool.
Good. Right. Silence. Dead air is death.
Dead air.
Dead air is death. So there's another thing to think about when you're thinking about what your concept is, what your elevator pitch is, what what makes you unique is when you come up with that, who's your audience, right? Like who are the people that you're looking for to tell about your show, right?
Yeah. Actually, there's questions in the chat that are pertaining to this topic.
Sure.
So I think I'm going to grab the top one because I see that at the top of the chat. It says, can a podcast be about RPG theory and GMing / playing PBTA at once? And since we were talking about thesis statements, I think that's a perfectly fine time to answer that question. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, great.
You're right. Absolutely.
I listen to it. I love PBTA.
Yeah. So yeah, we love PBTA. We talk about it all the time. I think you might want to tie those things together somehow. Not every episode has to be about PBTA. Or you could one of the things I was thinking about saying earlier was that your podcast doesn't have to go on indefinitely. I think you asked that question too. The same question. It doesn't have to. We'll do BXP. We'll do BXP for as long as it interests both of us, which has lasted way longer than I think either of us ever expected it to.
Yeah.
But that's because the internet makes me infinitely angry. So I get in fights with people on Twitter or watch stupid arguments, and then I'm like, that's a BXP topic.
Get accidentally almost banned from our Discords.
Yeah, I think there was a question about how to plan topics to make sure the podcast will run for some time. Is it better to have all episodes in one series or to have mini-series, RPG theory, gaming, PBTA, etc.? That I think depends on how much work you want to put into breaking things down and organizing your thoughts. I'm not sure that anything's better or worse. Senda, I'll shut up.
No, I was going to say, so I've been doing Panda's Talking Games for 3 years, and it started out as a short form show that specifically compared GMing one-shots to GMing campaigns, and how you could use different mechanics in those two situations, kind of like con game versus home game campaign. And we honestly kind of ran out of topics. Like, we started getting to the point where we're like, well, we kind of already covered this. We kind of already covered this. We kind of already covered this, right? And the answer is we could have just stopped the show, but we do have a lot of people who enjoy listening to it. I love recording it. I edit the stupid thing on a weekly basis, and our outtakes are hilarious. So I was like, I'm not we weren't going to stop because we were still enjoying the action of making the podcast. So I think the thing to remember is it's okay if you have exhausted the original thing that you did, it's okay to rotate or adjust what you're talking about, right? So we aren't focusing on one-shots versus campaigns specifically anymore, but we approach our topics from 2 points of view. Like, recently we were talking about mysteries, and we were talking about planning and prepping mysteries versus improvising mysteries at the table. So then we still have 2 points of view, but they're not one-shots versus campaigns. They're prepping versus improvising, right? So I think the important thing is to remember that if you set up an elevator pitch that really works, it probably will guide you into the logical evolution of that podcast if you are interested in continuing it, right? But you also don't have to. I've been listening to these amazing gals talking about Shakespeare's plays and stuff. I'm like, when they get through all of the plays, what are they going to talk about? I don't know. And that's okay. It can end.
Yeah, it can end.
It's going to end eventually.
Yeah.
Even if you do it until you die, it's going to...
Right. Every podcast will eventually end.
Everyone dies.
And let's be honest and upfront here. Podcasts are actually quite a bit of work because editing is worth the time and energy because it makes them listenable. So they are a significant commitment, and there may just be a time when that amount of time doesn't exist in your life. So you have to kind of just know, this is the thing I'm doing right now. And then commit to it at whatever level is appropriate for you, and know that, it is a commitment. Right?
Yeah. I think at some point that we don't have time for this anymore will probably happen with BXP, at which point we will do a really stupid final episode.
Yeah.
And send it off Viking funeral style.
Flaming through the waves.
Yep. It'll be
roll me a spindrift.
A spindrift on fire.
Are there any more questions here about
There's a bunch more questions.
There's lots of questions
specifically about the concept stage.
I'm looking.
I see
the rest of these
production stuff. All right.
Production stuff. So
do we have anything else to say about concept stage?
Yeah, there's one more thing that I think we should actually talk about really quickly in this part, which is how important is it for a podcast to come out at regular weekly or biweekly intervals? And my opinion you will get varying opinions. My opinion about this is that it's actually super, super, super important. And it's something that you should probably be planning as part of your concept. And the answer to that, like the reason why, is because if people don't know when your podcast will come out again, they will not keep checking to come and listen to it. Right? Like, if you know that my podcast comes out every other Tuesday, which She's a Super Geek does, then every other Tuesday, you're like, oh, cool, it's that Tuesday. I'm listening to that on my way to work. Or like when Panda's Talking Games doesn't drop on a Monday, if something went wrong with like how I queued it up or whatever, I usually hear from at least 3 people by lunchtime, like, where is it? Where is it? Right? Like, because people are waiting for it. They know it's coming out. It comes out every Monday. It drops every Monday before they wake up in the morning, and they listen to it on their way to work. So like, you creating a routine allows other people, your listeners, to create a routine around when they listen to your show. And if they don't have a show, then chances are they're probably not going to come back and keep listening to it. So as best you can, I think it's actually super important to have some sort of regular release schedule. And that means that when you are conceptualizing this podcast, one of the things that you're trying to conceptualize is how frequently can I manage to release an episode, right? And like, that's about workload and that kind of thing. And the reason that She's a Super Geek is bi-weekly is because neither of us have time for that show to be anything more than bi-weekly. Like, we can't make that commitment, and so it's bi-weekly. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
There are other theories of podcast stuff where people will record everything and edit it all and then release like Netflix so people can binge it. Like, I don't know. There's like drop episodes whenever they feel like it, whatever, like it pops up in your feed. But if you want it to be a professional reoccurring thing and you want to gather and maintain an audience, then having reliability in terms of your episode drops is really important.
So Senda is, of course, absolutely correct. That consistency is the way to maintain an audience. So we're going to talk about what happens when you fuck that up.
Go for it.
We have
as Senda's saying this, I'm like, yes, this is all very important. Yes.
It's okay.
I fucked that up so bad. Here's what happens when you don't update regularly, when you say that you're going to.
Yeah, every other Monday except when it's not.
Yeah. At the same time, podcasting doesn't make a lot of money and it's a hobby, and don't feel like this is something that you have to break yourself over. It is good to have realistic expectations of how often you can update, like Senda said. The same reason BXP is on supposedly a bi-weekly schedule. Mostly bi-weekly.
Yeah, it's not always the same day of the week.
Yeah. It's about 14 days.
We're going to have a talk later.
Are we in trouble?
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's important to have a realistic understanding of how often you can, even if it's every 3 weeks, even if it's just once a month, like, understand your limitations, how much time you have to devote to recording this and to editing it. Because having an understanding with your audience of, we will update on this day at this time, is really important to building that audience. I think that if you are going to record something like what Panda's Talking Games is and what BXP is, you want to stick to that weekly schedule. I think the Netflix binge model would be great for like a fiction or a narrative podcast. That's kind of like that. Something that's actually like a contained, but if you're just doing a consistent series, just do it, bi-weekly. If you don't do that, Senda's absolutely right. You'll start to bleed listeners because they don't know when you're updating. There may be all these different like subscription tools and things that ping them and little banners that dropped in on their phone, like, good news, BXP finally updated. Wow, who knew? But that's not something that you can or even really should rely on. So be realistic with your schedule, do your best to stick to it. And if you can't, try to anticipate your own needs and what you're going to need to do. Like, try to have a buffer and queue things ahead of time. Try to have a Rob who can help you out with that, or a Chris who can help you out with editing. Try to plan ahead for that.
Yeah, that buffer thing is a real good idea. I've never pulled that off in any of my shows. Like a last minute scramble. Oh, man.
Yeah, and if you're working with a partner or if you're working with a network, and you need, like, if you're behind, having a network, having someone else you can delegate other work to is super helpful. There've definitely been points where I've been like, if you're not gonna get this done, please let me know so I can tell someone to get help. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not mad, just like, if it's not gonna happen, we need to make it happen. And that's what we have the network for.
Yeah.
Do I need to call Chris? Do I need to like sound the horn and get Senda to come and save us?
God, they're call for it.
And that's the thing, like, you don't have to do this alone, but you can. I mean, I started it by myself.
Yeah, well, we also started solo, and then
I know.
By magic, and then we wound up on a panel with you.
I know, and then I was like, please let me steal you away. I would love to have you on my network. Fantastic. I'm gonna say, just because we're like halfway through, and there's actually a ton of questions in the questions.
There's some questions about production, and then I see some questions about promotion. So I guess we can just move on to that.
Right. Like
production.
Do you want to maybe just jump directly and like just talk about the questions? And then if we like run out of stuff to talk about, we can jump back over. Because I think we're probably going to end up overlapping a lot of things that are on our list, but we can that way like specifically address the stuff that our listeners want to hear.
Right. So a lot of these questions are about production. So why don't we just answer them and then use that to springboard off of other things we can talk about pre-production. And that's really, it's backwards in my thing. That's really her bag.
I know that the cameras
I'm reading over the questions, trying to think of how to like segue into
I'm just looking at like we can just start at the top, but they don't have to necessarily.
There's a question about podcasts with two people from one city. Is it better to record together or I thought it's a different cities, and I was like, we know all about that.
No, I know all about both of those things. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's interesting. So let's see, we answered that one. So let's just start at the top of like the production questions, and which is any tips to record so that it makes editing easier to cut, like making many breaks.
Like
there's a thing I think we have to start to talk about first, which is your actual recording setup is part of what will make it easier for you to edit. And if you are in person, you do want to put mics in front of all of the people. Please don't just put a microphone in the middle of your table. Please. If you have a Mac, I know that you can use it as a soundboard to actually input multiple microphones and record simultaneous tracks from all of them. If you do not, there's probably still a way to do it. I just don't personally know it, but like you'll need
much
some way.
Actually, I've tried it on my Mac, and I have to download all sorts of extra.
No, you don't. Oh, we'll talk later.
Oh, okay. Senda's gonna teach me some stuff.
Oh yeah, there's a thing. There's literally you can just go into your audio settings and create an linked up microphones.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah. Oh no, did I stop for a second?
You've been a little robotic today, but it's cool. I've been able to keep up. It's cool.
Okay. Anyway, yeah. Well, Google aggregate audio.
Okay.
And we can talk about it later. It's exciting.
Write it down.
So yes. So firstly, there's the in-person. In person, you will not have some of the struggles that you have when you are recording if you are in different places. The biggest thing about making it easy to edit audio that you've recorded separately on multiple machines is making the tracks line up, which there's a couple of like different ways to handle one right now simultaneously, because I think this episode is going to come out as an episode of Bonus Experience. Is that right? Just smile.
Who told her?
It was me. I told her.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So there's tools online that you can use, like one that we happen to be using right now.
Running in the background right now.
Running in the background right now. Which is TriCast. And there's also like Zencaster and like a bunch of things that you can use to record that will record all the tracks lining up next to each other, which is super handy. In my experience, those tools have some slightly glitchy issues with deciding which audio it should promote and which audio it should fade out if you have multiple people talking at a time. So the way that I have been recording, and this is the like way more old-fashioned way, is like everybody on your computer, 3, 2, 1, hit record. And the first thing that we do when we sit down to record a thing is like sneaky line up all the tracks, right? Yeah. thoughts?
That was actually how BXP began. Was Monica and I would coordinate over some like VoIP, like we used Bumble at first,
yeah.
and then I would just physically line up the tracks as we recorded separately in Audacity. Then we started using Zencaster for a bit because it looked like a great solution because we could just go in to Zencaster and it would automatically like process the audio and line it all up for us, and multi-track recording, which is so super important. If you have multiple people, multi-track recording will make it so simple for you to edit. But Zencaster had a lot of issues. It started out like the first like month was great, and then the audio quality started really suffering, and there was these weird like lag. There'd be lag in the track where Monica and I would be just fine, but then our guest would be like 5 minutes longer because it had just added all this silence. We switched to Cast, which is trica.st. And so far that's been excellent. The sound quality's been really great and I haven't had any glitches with it.
And it was cheaper.
And it was much cheaper.
Also
Lancaster,
awesome.
get your shit together.
Yes.
And that's how we've been able to coordinate coordinate recording, and then it helps with the editing because I don't have to constantly make little adjustments in Audacity to get the tracks back online. As far as making editing easier to cut, I try to look for if it's something really it's a lot of personal like best practices. Try not to acknowledge a sound that's in the background, because then I have to worry about, okay, should I cut out this whole conversation we now had about the cat that meowed, or just leave it in there because I guess that's what we talked about on the podcast for a second. If the cat meows and you just completely ignore it and then repeat yourself, it's really easy for me to just cut that edit out. I can't remember what I was going to say next.
We don't ever shut up about weird things that happen in the background.
No, and we don't pay attention to that.
It's on brand.
Yeah, and that's why we now offer extended cut episodes where you can hear most of the dumb shit.
I have to cut out so much dumb shit. Belches.
This is
children coming in, just barging in, like, can I have cookies? Yes.
This
Get
is
out.
This is why I have bonus outtakes. Like, that's all the stuff that I'm like, will you buy this from me, please?
Sometimes those also become our cold open.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can keep it because it's just funny and it makes you more personable.
Yeah.
As far as recording a podcast in one take and then editing it, or recording it in a few takes, that depends on what you're doing, honestly. When it's just the two of you and you're trying to promote like a conversational back and forth, it's okay to be rough. It's okay to mess up a word and have to go back or go like, I fucked up. If you're trying for a more like polished, professional, almost like a documentary feel, you might want to get it in a couple of takes so that it sounds as clean as possible. For BXP, we fuck around a lot. So I think we only do extra takes when it's okay, that was our topic sentence, we should probably rephrase that.
Yep.
Or that was the name of the guest, we should probably repeat ourselves.
Yeah,
like
we only take stuff if we are laughing too hard to deliver it correctly, or if I have a case of the letter flippies and
letter flippies,
yeah, like Kamish Hammerin.
I still left that in though. It was great. Depends on your brand. Right, sometimes you cut it, sometimes you keep it. And Kamish is a great dude with a great sense of humor.
He thought it was great.
Kind of amazing. Yes. There's a part of making editing easier that is like everything that you can do to make the sound quality better up front so you have less cleanup to do on the back end. Like know how your mics work. Like I'm been doing my recording. This is an ATR mic, but I have a Yeti sitting over there that I used to record on. But the thing about the Yeti is it picks up way more of my sound space, and I actually don't want that for podcasting. So I started using Guy for podcasting because it doesn't pick up my heater coming on, and the fact that when I talk loudly in the sound box of my harp, you probably can't hear it. I can. You can't hear it because this is really direct. Even over, it gets way quieter. So, like, your equipment actually has a lot to do with how much editing you may or may not end up having to do. In terms of, and then we all kind of just develop our own personal theories about when you cut out content or ums and ahs. Like personally, I cut out an or an ah if it is not attached to another word, but if it is attached to another word conversationally, like you're like, and then, right? So there's no break. Instead of like, and then, I would have cut out the, and then, but not the, and then, right? Like, so like everybody has weird little tweaky, like decision-making things about what we think still sounds natural, but cleaned up. Like, you know, Ray's giving me a weird look.
No, I'm thinking about it because this is all like important stuff that is like, I had some of it was intuitive from just, you know, playing around in a radio station as a kid. And some of it was stuff that I had to look up and see what, like, you know, broadcasting people actually had to say about it. For your equipment, like Senda was saying, like the everyone talks up the Blue Yeti as incredible microphones, and yes, they are incredible. Exactly for the reasons that Senda mentioned. It's going to pick up literally every sound around you.
It's not actually an ideal podcasting mic.
No, especially if you are just getting started and you're an amateur and you don't have like an ideal studio with soundproofing.
This is my studio.
Yeah, I'm recording in my office. I have a window right here, which is an audio recording no-no. If I had a Blue Yeti, my sound would be so like just reverberations constantly. So I have an ATR. I don't even remember how it was, like $40. It was nothing, you know, especially if you're just getting started and you're not sure if podcasting is really going to take off for you, don't feel like you got to drop it on a Blue Yeti. Those things are hella expensive. You should though get a pop filter.
Please get a pop filter.
Get a pop filter.
I have this.
They're really inexpensive.
Squishy thing.
Yeah, get the little
something
thing.
They're
really inexpensive. The thing without a pop filter is when you pop, it makes a really sharp sound and it sounds really, it sounds kind of weird. But with a pop filter, it evens that out and makes it sound a lot rounder, and you don't have to worry about like puffs of air like spiking on your waveform. If you have a less than ideal setup where you have like a bunch of bare walls or there's a window or whatever, you can hang up really heavy blankets to try to keep the echo from getting too loud. And then I probably over edit in Audacity, honestly. Like between noise gate to try to cut out like, oh, oops, someone's washing laundry next door. The laundry room is right next to me. Like, this is not the ideal recording setup.
I also record in an office with the washer and dryer in the hallway right behind it. So, yep.
Noise gate, which you can download for Audacity. It's really easy to figure out, really simple. High pass filter to make sure there's no like weird frequencies going on. And then I use like a really gentle equalization on everybody's individual tracks, and that can cover for a lot of audio sins that you wouldn't have any control over. The things that you do have control over, like burping directly into the mic, you can keep that if that's part of your thing. But I think I might over edit a little bit. I sometimes I get a hair up my ass about, I said like 7 times in the sentence, I have to cut them all. And sometimes I just like, fuck it, just like truncate silences, because a couple of them were like 2 seconds long while we tried to read around outline. And then I just send it out. Like it kind of depends on the conversational tone of your podcast.
Yes. And part of that is a decision like making process, right? And like definitely my theories about editing and like how much I do and how versus how much I don't definitely developed over time, and how much time I have to spend on my podcast and how much time I want to spend on my podcast. And Andy does pretty much all of the She's a Super Geek editing now, and I do all games as like a one, usually the noise gate to get rid of, right? And then I edit real quick for ums and ahs and like things that were way off topic that I drop into the outtakes that play after the credits. And then I actually run it through an automatic to make sure, like I export the raw file as still a full uncompressed this handy little program called Levelator, which is like all of my podcasts are always at the same level when they're released to everybody in the world. They're great. But I'm really sad because now I can't update my Macs because they stopped updating it. And when the new operating system gets on my computer, it's gonna break. I'm like, I can never update my computer ever again. What will I do? Anyway, but right now he's Levelator for all of that. I'm just like, the tracks are kind of off. Whatever. I kind of got it sort of close just based on me audibly kind of futzing with it, and then like just drop it into Levelator and it fixes it. What flavor of bubbly is it? I mean, the audience needs to
mango.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Okay, cool.
Bubbly is superior to the LaCroix. I've decided it's
really?
mango or blackberry or peach or strawberry. Those are your 4 options. Those are incredible. They had 2 summer only flavors that were great, pineapple and watermelon, but you can't find them anymore, which is a shame because they tasted like Jolly Ranchers.
I've been on the Monica train, which is I buy the Sprouts brand, off-brand sparkling water right now, but then also Spindrift.
Spindrift is good.
I have a Spindrift session. Yeah. The grapefruit one though. Anyway, cool. Recording with 2 people from one city. Is it better to record together on one mic or 2 mics in the same room or record remotely? The answer is I don't care as long as you have 2 mics. So just not the first one.
If you're lucky, my local library actually has a makerspace with a sound booth that we can like rent out with multiple microphones. So you might be able to find maybe like a local community college or something has a similar setup where if you absolutely have to be recording together with separate mics, you might be able to like rent out a space that actually has really good equipment that you don't have to buy. Otherwise, you're going to need 2 mics.
Yeah, you're going to need 2 mics whether you're in the same room or not. Please, 2 mics. You need to have mic per person.
How do you organize yourself to record? Meet for 2 hours every week, then 2 edit. Monica and I kind of just do it by the seat of our pants, honestly. We'll look at it. We'll look at our backlog and go, oh shit, we're out of episodes. We got to record for 4 hours on Sunday. And it's never been that long.
It's never been that long. I mean,
but yeah, we'll record as needed. And if we are feeling the energy, we'll go for a couple episodes. I completely cut off Monica.
Oh, no, I was just saying it's never been that long. It's usually 2 hours of recording time for about 30 minutes of content.
Yeah. It'll be one whole episode of like extended cut and then 30 minutes of actual content.
Yeah. We are very easily distracted and we don't shut up. So sometimes we will generate a full episode times worth of content that has nothing to do with our show.
And sometimes we stay on topic and it's like, oh shit, we're already done.
Yeah, occasionally we are like have a lot to say and just sort of power right through it and then are like, oh, guess we have time for another. But as far as organizing when to record, having a consistent day is good. But very much like when we were talking about being on schedule, we're bad at that. And like I have a lot of things going on in my personal life that prevent me from basically being free every Monday from 7 to 8 or whatever. I have a day job. I work for a shift. I work 8 hours. I do it every day, which means that I am not available to like sit down and record from about 8:30. Well, before then, because I'm not a morning person. So there's no way in hell that I'm getting up at 7:30 to talk to you for 30 minutes. It would be the worst. I would not be awake.
I don't want to see you.
Yeah, I don't want to see you that early. Life. Except maybe on our Discord. But like I don't want to talk to you in that regard that early.
Yeah.
But like so I'm unavailable basically from when I wake up until when I get home, and that's like around 5 p.m. And then I don't want to jump right into doing more what is technically work, even if it's hobby work. Plus, I got to eat. I want to decompress from my day. I have other things I need to do. So we usually record in the evening after 7, because that's usually after when both of us have gotten
I got to feed a family.
Yep.
I got to get my together.
All of that to say, all of that basically to say that you should accommodate for your own life. Sometimes we literally are texting each other that morning and are like, I think the backlog's empty. What are you doing at 8:30 tonight?
We're recording an episode, apparently.
Yeah. If the answer is nothing, it's recording.
Why are we on this panel?
Well, so I'm going to tell you from a different perspective.
Thank you.
Because I record with
adult.
No, I'm not actually. Because
why are we doing this?
No. This is really interesting, right? So, like, I record Panda's Talking Games with Phil. He is a very responsible individual. We record that show every Monday at 8 o'clock my time. and it drops, the episode drops that morning, and then we record the new one that night, like clockwork, every Monday. She's a Super Geek. We record once a month-ish, and sometimes we're like, wow, we did not plan with enough time to actually get all of these people on mics, and now we need a 2-player game, and we're going to play that. So it depends on what you're doing and how much content you generate at a time. When we're recording She's a Super Geek, we are playing a game for 2 to 4 hours. So we do generate a lot of content at once because we drop that in 1-hour chunks, right? So we're not recording all the time for it. We end up doing it about once a month. I try and plan in advance because I do have to wrangle 1 to 2 guests to be on that show every time. It's not usually just me and Andy playing, but sometimes it is, because sometimes it is. Actually, the next episode is going to be really interesting because it's really just me. It was a single player LARP, and I basically just narrated my way through it. Should be cool. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
But
we're at roughly 10-minute warning.
Cool.
Okay. So let's wrap up with the rest of the questions.
Well, there was one more part of that one that I just lost, which is shoot.
What platform? That's promotion related. That's promotion related. Oh, scripts. That's still production related. The last thing is question was about
the last thing is scripts. Here is the other really important thing I think we need to emphasize about the recording schedule question. It will not take you 2 hours to edit 2 hours of audio. It will take you a minimum of 4 hours to edit 2 hours of audio. If you are actually listening to it and editing ums and ahs, assume, especially starting out, it takes you at least 2 to 3 times as long to edit the audio as it took you to record it.
Even when you get good at it and start finding out all the shortcuts, it's still going to take
like you a while.
Twice as long as it took to record.
It takes me 1.5 to 2 times as long as it took to record to edit Panda's Talking Games, and that show is pretty much down to a science at this point, right? So we release a 45-minute episode every week. I've usually spent about 3 to 4 hours of work on that episode per week. So like, just plan that in. Like, it's not going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. Cool. Platforms.
Right, quick.
Let's start platforms. We're going to get through this real fast. Scripts. You want to talk scripts?
Yeah,
Sorry.
we'll do scripts quick. Yeah,
scripts. Okay, production. No. We have an outline. We have an outline.
Yeah. Pandas has an outline.
Yeah.
Pandas has an outline too. She's a Super Geek has nothing. Literally nothing. Because it's a game. We just run it. We're like, oh.
Yeah.
You froze.
It's perfect. Yeah, no. So like, I think scripting
I'm glad that I can entertain.
Scripting itself is probably a bad idea, especially if you want to do a discussion and theory show. Like, you don't want to can your responses, because I think, especially for like, I don't know, are you if you're aiming for like a documentary style, maybe you do want to write a script.
If you were doing like a single person documentary style, like exploratory, you should have a script and actually practice that script a couple of times to make sure that it flows, because writing and speaking are completely different. You could be writing something that looks great on paper, and then you read it out loud and you're like, I used an S 18 times, and it's just going to be into the. But if you're just doing conversational, make sure that it's just point by point. And if you think of something really intense that you don't want to forget, and you want to make sure that you say it out loud for your podcast, you can write that out like straightforward. But if you're just doing conversational, you just want it to.
I think our show is extremely conversational, and yet our outline is pretty detailed, to be honest. Like,
it's because we have ADHD.
Yeah.
We remember what we were talking about.
Like, we'll write down all this stuff, and I don't always read it exactly. But like, a lot of the times when I write down detailed stuff on the script, it is so that I don't forget what I wanted to say. And in like, sometimes I'll think of a really funny thing that I want to say in response to that, and so like, that's the joke. I've written the joke down right then, and then like, and then I can deliver it later. So like, I definitely recommend outlining what you want to say so that you don't forget it, and so that if you have punchy things or whatever that you want to say specifically, that it's there and that you don't forget, because you'll kick yourself if you are listening to the episode later and we're like, oh, I had a good point I wanted to make and I didn't make it, you know?
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. I will keep talking.
Good. Yeah, no, we'll keep plowing on through and see what we can get through. Cool. So should we jump to platform?
Yes.
Okay, which platform do you recommend to start with? Yes.
Platform and promotion.
platform
Right.
information.
There are so many options for platforms. I can't even begin to tell you, but essentially they fall into, there's about 3 different ways you can do it. You can work with a platform who provides you a page and deals with the file hosting and all the RSS feed and everything like that. And that's nice because it's easy, it's self-contained. You don't have to do anywhere near as much work. You're not responsible for maintaining stuff. If something breaks, all of those things, it's more expensive, right? So it has all the pros, and then it has an expense con. Which is that's how they make their money for some of that stuff, or for customizing it, right? Or for having like your own URL and that kind of thing. Option 2 is you completely go it alone and you just go out and you get a domain name and you get hosting space. And in that case, if you do that, the easiest solution is to then install WordPress and to get this handy dandy plugin called PowerPress, which is Blueberry's plugin for podcasting. It will allow you to do one or multiple podcasts, and it pulls in the stats from Blueberry, which is why it is the most popular podcasting plugin. There are many others out there, so you're not glued to that one. It is the one that I recommend because otherwise you won't have any stats. And if you want to try advertising or something, you have to be able to tell people how many people listen to your show, because that's like how you get advertising, right? So that's option 2. That is what Misdirected Mark as a whole does right now. She's a Super Geek is on its own page still, but we feed in that stuff into Misdirected Mark. All of that stuff is on our own hosting service. And sometimes we have growing pains because of that, right? Like that was a decision we made, and like we need to go expand what our hosting space is because the network is bigger than it was when it started. So that's the inherent pitfall there, but gosh, it costs a lot less. Then the median ground that you can do is you can set something up like your own WordPress on it, and then still use a service like Blueberry or Podcaster or stuff to actually insert the audio into your posts. And that's sort of the hybrid of the two. Where's the center of my camera? I don't know. It's backwards. It's the hybrid of those two things so that you're not dealing with the feed stuff. Somebody's dealing with that for you and you're paying them for that monthly. And then you've got your hosting and your website and stuff, which has a little bit more customizability. So those are kind of the 3 basic ways to approach getting a podcast online. Yeah. Any quick thoughts on that one? That was just
That's good. That's good.
Good. I was like, that was like the
more to say on that
fast
topic.
run through.
I recommend to start out. We tried Libsyn for the first like life cycle of our podcast, and we used like their cheapest hosting first, and there's a limit on how much data you can use, basically. So we had it like, okay, we can only do 2 episodes a month, and they have to be a very specific length, or we'll go over our hosting size. But it was great for complete beginners because I didn't know anything about RSS feed aggregation or anything, and Libsyn took care of all of that.
Yeah,
as long as I gave them a little bit of money, which is like, I'm fine with that. That's okay.
Oh yeah,
it was like $5 a month or something. It was great.
It was really cheap.
I've learned a lot about
RSS.
RSS.
Mark showed up. Yeah, and then Misdirected Mark showed up, and now it's kind of, I mean, because we're part of this great network now, it's not really as different from, it's not that different from Libsyn for me, honestly. I drop in the file and I put in the copy and I'm done.
Yeah. The problem is when it breaks, then Rob and I go, oh God, what do we do? It is the one thing that I will say, and this is just something to know about, it is not super easy to move a podcast from one place to another if you change your mind, depending. And you two have been through this, right? Like you have to like basically go to your old feed and tell your old feed, this is where the new feed is, and like put a redirect in there so that it stays there forever, and like give it the podcast syndicators to like move everything. So like if you feel very confident in how you want to do it to start out with, then, and you're like on my own page, then I would say do that to start with, right? Like don't start it somewhere and then be like, oh, I'll just move it later. Like it's kind of a pain. It's totally doable, but it's like not like an, oh yeah, click this, click that. Yeah.
You need a Rob and a Senda helping you out.
And to be entirely honest, I was really happy we're on Libsyn because like the manual way to manage that permanent redirect is like really messy. And I was like really happy that they were like, you can just type this in. And I was like, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because otherwise
Libsyn honestly is great. If you're not really sure which way you want to go with, Libsyn is, I honestly can't recommend them enough because they really helped us basically get off the ground. And as far as promotion goes, I think the most we did is we had a Twitter
We still have that Twitter.
Yeah, but that was like we just shoved it at everybody. We were like, hey, we're artwork for your
artwork
is so important, especially for podcast catchers like iTunes, because that album art, they look at that to see like, okay, so should we put you on trending and notable? If you have some like Microsoft Word art, they're not going to give you a second glance. I highly recommend, if you have any spare cash and you know a graphic designer or someone recommends one to you, go to a graphic designer and ask them to make you a logo, ask them to make you a little album art, because I don't think BXP would have gotten even half as far as it did without the awesome work of our graphic designer.
Yeah. Who then also made LaCroix t-shirts for us.
Yeah.
All right. I think we're
at time. We're at time.
We are pretty much at time. Cool. But you can, so let's just really quickly, you can find me on Twitter at Idella Mithland, IDELLA MITHLYNND, or at SassGeek Podcast, or at Pandas Talk Games. All of those are much easier to spell. So if you want to ask me more questions on the Twitter, please feel free. And where can we find you too?
I am at Zenith Sun on Twitter. You can argue with me about games if you want to.
I'm at Ray_Cole. That's RAI, like it says in my little thing there. And our podcast is at bxpcast.com.
Yeah, and you can find the Misdirected Mark Network at Misdirected Mark on Twitter, and you can ask questions there too, because honestly, I look at that one too, but lots of us do. Anyway, but thank you so much for coming and listening. We ran right up to the time, and we will go ahead and jump off and let the other panels for the awesome Gauntlet Con. Yay.
Bye. Everybody get out!
Everybody.